fall within itself. As we go around the tank, we just keep pushing it in on itself, and as it comes down, and once it's down safely, then we work around it and process it. We just basically keep cutting it up, small pieces until it's done. It's
But
not,
he just said that the residue at the bottom of the tank is going to be tested. Is that going to be tested from the first cut? Or
How do you,
it can't be tested until we
what do
remove
you
the
mean by
materials.
residue?
You said that there was some sand and oil at the bottom of
No,
the,
that's beneath the floor.
oh, beneath the floor, I see.
Sand is underneath the floor plates. So they're gonna take the top of the tank, cut it and collapse it in, and then cut up all that material and load it into trucks. We get down to the floor, they'll pull up the floor and cut it, and then we'll have access to the sand. We'll be able to test it and see what constituents are.
Are you doing any grinding on that lead paint at all, or sanding or anything like that? Just cutting it? And
No,
when-
in order to start his shears, he needs an opening to
Yeah.
get the shears
I
into.
understand that.
We're going to chemically strip the paint from those areas so that he can use a torch to cut those starter holes.
So you'll chemically strip the paint off of all the tanks?
Off the area where they're going to torch cut to start the shears. The shears themselves don't volatilize the lead, they don't create dust. Some of the paint may flake off. It's going to be sort of within the area of the tank. There may be some paint chips, and we're going to clean all that up as we go. We don't expect any lead dust coming out of that process.
But you are monitoring nonetheless?
Yes, yeah, we're going to be monitoring that again visually and with sampling. The important part is that we don't want to use torches on lead-based paint because that turns the paint into a fume
Right.
that can travel. So we're going to completely remove the lead and 12 inches beyond any place that we're going to torch cut.
Chemically?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to be it's a caustic gel that we paint onto the paint and put a fabric goes onto the gel, and it sits there for a while and lifts the paint, and then we just peel it off and put it in the drum. So there's no volatiles and no dust with that stripping process.
Okay. And then I know we touched on asbestos, but there's got to be asbestos in these pipes, or in some part of this was built in
There's,
1961.
well, the gaskets on the manholes look like lead. I've taken samples of those, or look like asbestos, I'm sorry. I've taken samples of those, but those are non-friable, and those will simply be placed into a waste bag and given to the asbestos hauler. An asbestos inspection was done, and none of the materials they tested contained asbestos. The city's asked me to test the gunite, the shotcrete on the burns, and I'm collecting samples of that. I'd be shocked if that had asbestos, but we'll test it. Then there's gaskets in the pipe joints that we can't see at this point. For the most part, he's going to cut the pipe away from the joints and not break those joints at all, and leave it to the recycler to deal with that. Where he needs to break a joint, we'll simply, again, peel the gasket off and put it in a bag. Typically, there's no fiber release from that process. We're going to assume those gaskets are asbestos, or else I'll test them.
Thank you.
Do you have any more?
No, that covers the section on the,
Okay, I have some questions regarding biological issues, not environmental
That would
issues.
be, yeah, you hired the biologist.
Okay.
I know some
Before I get into that, I just have one more questions about operations. Right now, there's been an estimate about how many truckloads are going to be required to remove the steel from the tanks, the shotcrete, the foundations. My question is, once the soil underneath the tank is exposed, is there a circumstance in which more material might have to be hauled out? In other words, some of the jet fuel leaked, it's in the reports, and it's as much as 40 feet down. Is there a circumstance where some of that soil, there was a leak under the tanks, and I believe another one over here by the pumps. Is there a circumstance in which more material is going to be hauled out, and also will, if that is true, will they have to haul soil in to replace it? Because it all bears on how many loads of material.
That would not be part of this project. Okay, this project is demolition of the tanks and piping and so on, removal of the foundations. The existing soil contamination that's already been discovered and whatever may be present under the tanks, if something needs to be done about that, that's going to be a separate project. It's unlikely, I would say, that we're going to find anything that needs to be done immediately as part of this project. The releases that have been found already, the regulators are aware of it. They didn't say you got to clean this up right away. In fact, the water board said they had no concerns about the groundwater. If we find any leakage under the tanks, again, that's probably not something that's so urgent that it has to be done in the next 3 months as part of the demolition project. The plan is, after the tanks are gone, we're going to do the testing. We're going to write a report, basically giving a picture of the whole site with the previous investigations and the one that we do after demolition, and say this is what the soil looks like. This is the contamination that's there. We'll probably have recommendations on whether it needs to be cleaned up, how it would have to be cleaned up if there's going to be a residential development there, how it would have to be cleaned up if it's going to be a park, whatever. And then that would go to either the county or a state regulator.
One more related question. There may be contaminated soil with JP5 exposed after the tanks are removed. Doesn't that imply that stuff could become dust and then blow into the atmosphere?
It might. If that's the case, we'll have to deal with it when we find it. We don't expect to expose any petroleum contaminated soil that would be an issue during the